We're kicking off this video with news from John Cena, and though we all know he was on top of WWE for a very long time, did he always use the right tactics? One person who certainly doesn't think so is former superstar Tyler Rex, who spoke on the Lewis Nichols show about his relationship with Big Match John. In the interview, Rex talked about an angle he had planned with his then tag team partner Kurt Hawkins, which would see the pair get fired from TV, but would keep finding ways to get back in the arenas for attention. He said, "We went to talk with him and John Cena had a great conversation with us. He's like, 'This is a killer idea, man. Can you put this on DVD? Go to Brooklyn Brawler right now in the promo room. Can you put this on a DVD?' So we go to the promo room and we cut a few promos and outline what we wanted to do. We get it all done in a night. Cena is like, 'Do you have the DVD?' He takes the DVD and he goes, 'I'm on the jet with Vince tonight and we're going to talk about it.' We go, 'Awesome.' The next week we see John at TV and we ask how did it go, and he said, 'It went pretty good, let's see what happens.' Okay, cool. Guess who got fired the next week on Raw? It was Miz and Truth. We looked at it and we were like, this is a lot like what we just pitched. We went to John and said, 'This is a lot like what we just put on a DVD. Did we just get screwed?' He said, Nah, this is something totally different." Okay, so this looks like the storyline that we just pitched that nobody's ever done, so it's not going to be as cool when we do it. The next week, that storyline progressed and was basically what we pitched, but with Miz and Truth, with John as the guy they jump at the end. We had a term that we used called being Burchelled, because Paul Burchill would pitch stuff all the time, and creative would take it and use it for someone else. At one point, we just asked Cena, "Are we being Burchelled?" And he's like, "Yeah, you did," blatantly telling us that he stole our stuff and used it and left us at the bottom. Tyler Rex said he was angry at the time for having those opportunities taken from him. Things are different now and he sees things in a different light. Now he's not angry. He grew and learned through the experience. He holds no hard feelings against John Cena because he's a top guy for a reason, and if that's how things were handled, then more power to him, man. This wasn't the only issue that Rex had with Cena, as he also revealed, "Where did our bad relationship come from? It started when I got drafted to Raw, and it was all about me using a finisher that looked similar to his. The interesting part is when Tyler Rex was being introduced as a heel and I was coming off the bragging rights deal where I took Caval's low-key spot that he had done in a match against Big Show. So he comes out, gets cocky, I'm like, I want your spot, and we have a match, and I took his spot. Nobody had seen this character before. Before all of this happened, we were rehearsing in front of the agents before a show, and Arn Anderson was my agent. He said, 'Rex, what's your finisher?' I said, 'I'm using the Burning Hammer. Basically, it's like an inverted attitude adjustment, but I flip them over and sit down with a DDT. It's nowhere near the same. Personally, I think it's a lot cooler.' Goldust says, 'I'll take the Burning Hammer for you,' and we do it in front of everyone, and Cena was right there, and they go, 'Oh God, are you okay, Dust?' He said, 'Yeah, it's easy, no problem.' I don't remember who had the earpiece on, but someone said, 'Okay, Vince likes it, use it.' There was reportedly no issue with Rex's finisher, as Arn Anderson, Cena, and over a dozen stars were there to witness McMahon approving the move. Rex even used it at the 2010 bragging rights event with no issue, but it wasn't until he got drafted to Raw that things got difficult. During a Raw house show against Primo, the former tag team champion turned wrong, leading the move to look like Cena's AA, and the 16-time world champion didn't appreciate this, as Rex claims, "Cena looks at me in front of all of the boys and says, 'You might have to find another finisher.' I looked him dead in the eyes and said, 'Sorry man, I know it looked a little screwed up tonight, it didn't come off the way it should have, we'll get it right tomorrow.' When tomorrow came around, Primo asked if the finish should be changed, and given that no agents told him to change the finish, he told Primo that nailing the Burning Hammer correctly should be fine and won't look like the AA. All that changed after the match, as Rex says, 'We did it, I go backstage, and Cena just starts yelling at me in front of all the guys. Like he just, "What did I effing tell you last night? Are you deaf?" I'm like, "Whoa man, what's wrong?" He's like, "I told you to find another finisher." He's yelling at me and degrading me like I was a 6-year-old kid. Apologizing to the 16-time world champion didn't calm Cena down, and Rex merely walked away from John, who was still ranting to him as he left. After feeling like he was going to quit, Rex returned to speak to John, but was cursed out again, with Cena reportedly asking if Rex was stupid. By the time the roster got to the next Raw taping, everybody knew about what had happened, and Rex realized he had no choice but to change his finisher. When Michael Hayes questioned Rex on the decision, the former superstar simply said Cena had told him to do it. And all these years later, we don't expect any Christmas cards to be sent between these two this December. From one former WWE superstar to another now, as it wasn't too long after his recent release that Lio Rush teased never wrestling again. But now it seems that the man of the hour still wants to use the Rush name outside of WWE. This week, WBGR Sports and Entertainment Network LLC in Maryland applied for a trademark on the Lio Rush name, and this trademark applies to sports and entertainment, including professional wrestling. It's not surprising that WBGR Sports have applied for this trademark, as Rush has represented them in the past, including at a function for the Super Bowl, which can be found on one of Rush's older social media posts. At this time, it's hard to say what Rush will do next, as though he's currently focused on his music, it appears he hasn't closed the door entirely on pro wrestling. Though we don't know whether the self-professed man of the hour will compete again, one thing we're pretty confident about is that if he does, he won't want to work with Mark Henry. In the past, the world's strongest man hasn't exactly had the best of things to say about Rush, even claiming that Rush lied to his face. But now, the former NXT Cruiserweight Champion has fired back on Twitter saying, "Woke up remembering the time Mark Henry said I lied to him to his face and then continued to bury me on his podcast while telling me I need to learn how to spend my money better. It was crazy. Sorry, man. I didn't mean to have a wife and 2 kids on top of other responsibilities." This wasn't all Rush had to say about Henry, as he claimed what Henry said about him was sad, and added, "Tired of the shit. If you want to hear talk, put me on your podcast so we can have a conversation for the world to hear." Henry did end up replying to Rush's remarks, but it doesn't look like the recently released star will be appearing on Henry's podcast. As Mark said, "I don't have to answer to anyone. I said what I said. I've tried to help and mentor many. I can't make people do what I know to work." This isn't the end of the beef between Rush and Henry, as despite saying that he doesn't have to answer to anyone, Henry did tweet Rush with an offer to call him live on the air on Busted Open Radio. This is interesting to say the least, as Rush replied that he couldn't get through, saying, "This number isn't working. Unless you forgot to pay the bill, maybe you need to budget your money a little bit better. I don't even know why I'm entertaining this. Keep my name in your mouth if you please. You literally have nothing better to do than to continue to talk crap on a situation that happened over a year ago about a 25-year-old who just lost his damn job." It was at this point that Rush brought out the big guns, as he claimed in a tweet that it is because of Henry that African-American stars have struggled to get over in WWE. He said, "Sorry guys, I've been holding my breath for way too long. People like this need to get called out. It's sickening, it's disappointing, and extremely discouraging. I love my fans and pray that one day in the future, the state of this kind of matter progresses. And this is why African-American talent on the biggest platform will continue to not have equal opportunity because people like you constantly tear your own people down. A damn shame, honestly." Though Henry replied to Rush's previous comments, standing by his claims that the former Cruiserweight champion didn't work hard enough, time will tell whether the world's strongest man will respond to this latest accusation. Like we said, this is a strange time for Rush, who after putting up a ton of his wrestling gear for sale, may or may not wrestle again, and if he does, he should probably steer clear of the world's strongest man. And finally today we're ending with news from Brody Lee, who spoke to Busted Open Radio about his character being similar to Vince McMahon. As the Exalted One, the former Luke Harper has parodied a lot of McMahon's mannerisms, such as a disdain for sneezing and people eating before he is finished. But Lee gave a different reason for the character to Busted Open Radio, saying, "I happen to be a fan of mafia movies, so that's the way the character was portrayed for me. Like I said, I believe that the leadership style, the results speak for themselves." Lee went on to say that while fans can take the character how they want, nothing he's done similar to McMahon is intentional, though we doubt everyone will be convinced by this explanation. And finally today we're looking at news concerning the new Raw Women's Champion Asuka, who didn't just capture the coveted title on this week's show, but also made history. On Raw, Asuka was crowned the new Raw Women's Champion, as Becky Lynch explained that the Women's Money in the Bank ladder match was actually for the title. And with this win, the Empress of Tomorrow is now the first and only superstar to win the Raw, SmackDown, and NXT Women's Championships, the Women's Tag Team titles, as well as both a Money in the Bank match and a Royal Rumble match. On WWE's official Japan Twitter account, a translated video shows Asuka and Kairi Sane celebrating this achievement, with the new women's champion describing her win as unbelievable, while Sane said that people will need to start praising her tag team partner. It's certainly a huge accolade fitting the Empress of Tomorrow, and with Lynch expected to be out of the ring for the remainder of the year, it'll be interesting to see how the Red brand fares without the man, but the Empress of Tomorrow now in charge.